Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 629. I had the white pieces and start off with knight f3. It's trying to play the Reti opening, and my opponent obliges by playing d5. Lets me go into the Reti. Let's see, knight to f6 is a kind of a waiting move and very popular in the database and also the way I play it. And c5 would go into a different kind of setup, more of an English opening type of setup. Anyway, he goes d5, and now I can play with this idea c4, just trying to undermine the center directly. And it's not really a gambit, because if he takes the pawn, I'm going to check with the queen and round the pawn up. So the most common move here is to defend with either c6 or e6. c6 makes a lot of sense because I do plan to fianchetto the bishop, although I haven't moved the g-pawn yet, so actually it's not obvious maybe on the surface that that's part of the plan, but it's a typical idea when you have this pawn here that you want the bishop on this diagonal. So anyway, supporting this pawn makes a lot of sense. And now I go with g3. He goes knight f6, and I go bishop g2. d4 in either of these positions would just transpose back into some kind of queen's pawn opening. So I'm staying in different territory. Here I could have gone b3, but I went with bishop g2. Actually, I was thinking about, let's back up a second. I was thinking about b3 in this position as well. Yeah, b3 is playable here as well. Okay, but g3 is a little more common. So I went with g3, he went knight f6, and I went bishop g2. And once again, b3 there was an alternative. It's a way of just defending the pawn and keeping that. If he takes, you'll have another pawn replacing the pawn on c4, so you get that continued control of the light squared diagonal. So it makes a lot of sense, really. So he decides to take at this point before I get in b3. Let's see, what's his other choice here? Just continuing to develop with bishop e7. And now I play the rare move. So I should just continue with this normal plan of queen a4 check and rounding up the pawn. That's the most common way to play. I played this unusual way with knight to e4. And queen to d4 is actually a little bit embarrassing in this situation. If he were to play queen d4 here, I have to actually support the knight. I was thinking of playing this check, but the problem is after he blocks the check, if I try and round up the pawn with my knight, I'm walking into this fork. So this wouldn't have helped. I would still need to play a move like f4 to defend my knight and figure out how to round up that pawn some other way. So anyway, good thing for me that didn't happen. Let's see. So in the game, yeah, he just played bishop c5 instead of queen d4. And we're out of the opening book here. So bishop c5. And let's see. Oh, okay, those are the lines I was looking at. Here I played queen a4 check. And I can round up the pawn this way. I could have also just taken the pawn immediately with knight takes c4. I was actually worried about queen d4 in this position as well, because it looks like a double attack. It's hitting my knight, and he's threatening checkmate, but the knight can drop back to e3 and meet both threats, so it's not a problem. Anyway, but I rounded up the other way with the queen. Queen a4 check, goes c6, queen takes. So we get more of a typical position in the Reti here. He goes queen e7, defending his bishop, both sides castle. And white has done pretty well in the opening, actually. I'm doing fine here. I get d4 in with the tempo on the bishop, and you know, his bishop is kind of closed in this pawn structure. So he starts to, let's see, I develop my knight, and he challenges my knight with knight bd7. So I could try and hold that knight there, but trading isn't too bad. It does leave him with a bad bishop here. But I wasn't appreciating that in this position he can liberate that bishop with the e5 push. So actually the chess engine wants to play a little differently here. Wants to go with bishop g5, and then just trading off that bishop. Take, queen takes, and playing e3, and going for this kind of setup where I have a light squared bishop and this dark squared pawn chain, and trying to, in a way, I'm playing against this bishop. I think his light squared bishop can be liberated by pushing these pawns forward, so it's not going to be much of a problem. Anyway, I pushed on with e4, grabbing more center space, but he can always undermine the center with this e5 push. So, for example, e5, d takes, knight g4. It's going to round up that pawn. I could throw a knight a4 hitting his bishop. Let's see, bishop e6 hitting my queen, drop back, and then bishop back to c7. You know, I'm defending that pawn with my queen, but he's got 2 pieces on it, so he's going to be able to round that up. I could play f4, I guess, trying to defend it, but then maybe my position is a bit awkward. Anyway, the engine likes that for black. All of black's pieces have come to life. But anyway, he didn't play that way, and I didn't push the pawn forward either. The chess engine is also recommending for me to play with e5, but we just continued with other moves, leaving the center static here, and this leaves white with some advantage. Let's see, he went rook a to c8 here. This is setting up some tactics that occur later in the game, so we'll get to that. Bishop to e3. That's what my move h3 was preparing, this bishop e3 move, so I don't have to worry about the knight coming into g4. He goes bishop e8. I go rook f to d1, centralizing the rook. He goes bishop to a5, and now I push on with e5. The engine actually had been wanting me to play e5 for a while. It's a little bit counterintuitive maybe to give up the center and allow black to have this great square for his knight, but I get a good square for my knight too, and it's also looking at that d6 square, which is could be pretty vulnerable here. He went ahead and traded, knight takes e3, f takes, and since I was allowed to get an e5 here, the chess engine likes white's position quite a lot, in spite of the fact that black has the bishop here. It's, I guess, the combination of more space, and these center pawns, they look a bit maybe rigid at the moment, but once the knight moves out of the way, they actually have ideas of pushing forward and opening things up in the center. So he plays his bishop back to c7, and this also is helping to set up the tactic that occurs later in the game. Let's see, I decide to go for pressure on the f-file, rook f1. He goes b6 here, he's preparing c5. I go b4 to clamp down on that, and he goes h6. Keeps my knight from hopping into some squares over here. And I went a3. I want to free up my queen to be able to move, so I didn't want the queen having to defend the b pawn all the time. He went to king h8, and now I went rook to f3. So yeah, the engine did not like rook f3. Wants me, it's kind of this funny sequence, wants me to play king h2 here, and it wants black to put the king back on g8, so it's defending the f pawn, and say rook a to c1. In a way, it seems like I'm kind of running black out of moves. I do have a lot more space, so it gives this move a6, which seems to cause trouble later. So I'm not sure the analysis is correct here, really. Queen e2, c5, busting through finally. You know, queen e2 makes sense because now the bishop and the rook can coordinate on that c6 square. So I understand this part. c5 trying to free up that pawn, give it away, as it were, give away your weaknesses, and then queen takes a6. This is why I wasn't so sure about that a6 move, because this is a pawn snatching line, and after this he can't take the pawn back because my queen is looking at his rook. So rook to b8, and then rook f to d1 defending. And I've snagged a pawn here, and I still have some more spaces. His pieces are still a little bit cramped. But this bishop can now get into the game, I think. Maybe to c6, so it's not all one-sided. Yeah, actually I control c6, so maybe I'm still playing against that light-squared bishop. Okay, I wasn't thinking that way. I was thinking pressure on the f-file here. And let's see, what can black do? Black could push on with c5 right away, and you get the same tactic here that occurs later in the game. So I'll just go on and show it in the game. And let's see, he went rook d5. I go rook to f1. Now he goes c5, and I take. So instead of taking, if I had seen this tactic coming, maybe I would have found some other move. The engine just wants me to drop the queen back to c2. And then after he takes, to take, and once again, rook takes d4 runs into trouble, although I don't know if I would have found this move. But the move knight d6 turns out to be really strong. Kind of interesting. And, well, I don't know, if you want to play around with this position, you could maybe figure out why knight d6 is such a good move. The chess engine just wants to sack the exchange right away. Rook takes knight, and then queen takes, because rook takes knight, pawn takes, queen takes, because the bishop is pinned. The rook is loose back here. So, and that's good for white. But the question is, why can't black play some other move here? The rook is under attack, so maybe moving the rook out of the way. And the answer is that there's this weakness on f7. I just crashed through on f7, and the queen is hopping in here for the attack. And there's actually just a killer attack there with all the pieces lined up. So that's the idea of knight d6. It's not only hitting the rook, but it's threatening f7. And that's why black has to sack the exchange to get rid of the knight. So anyway, I didn't see this tactic coming at all. I took the pawn, he takes back, and I just took with the knight. And now the tactic is on. He can take on e5 because this pawn was overloaded, and this rook is under attack. I mean, the knight is pinned and it's under attack. So I cannot take the bishop. So he just snagged a pawn there. Although he gave up a pawn to get it, but he's kind of destroyed my center formation here. Anyway, I move my queen to unpin my knight. He drops his bishop back to b8, and but black is a little better from this point. Let's see, I retreat my knight. I'm trying to maneuver my knight around to a better square, and also maybe I was thinking of coming here to f4 to blunt this annoying pressure along this diagonal that was causing me problems during the game. He brings his rook over to b5, harassing my queen. Queen went back to d1, and then he played bishop to c6, just hitting my rook. But actually, this was a mistake, and this is my chance to get back in the game. So instead of rook to or bishop to c6, the engine is saying just queen takes a3, grab that pawn. After bishop c6, I can just grab here on f7. I'd set up this battery on the f file, and here's my chance to take advantage of it. He just left that pawn undefended, and I didn't notice. I saw the attack on my rook, and I forgot that the bishop was defending f7. So pure oversight on my part. So I played a defensive move. I moved the rook out of the way, and then after these exchanges, black is still better. So f6 now to blunt this diagonal, to blunt the pressure on the f file. Let's see, I went in with knight f4 to blunt the diagonal. And also, I'm starting to look at, he's got a weak pawn here on e6, but my plans are a little bit slow, and he just takes the knight off. Very practical approach. That knight is an obstacle. Oh, I took with the rook, and he takes it off. And then he comes in here with queen to b7 check. So I defended with queen f3. This is still okay. Well, black is better, but not completely winning. But because of this weak pawn here, black is effectively a pawn up. He comes in here with rook b2 check. And now my only chance to survive is actually to move the king. Any of these blocking moves lose. So how the game might continue, say king to g1, queen to c7. Okay. Oh, threatening to come in maybe along the second rank here. Queen to e4, covering that square. Queen to d6. So some creeping queen moves. Queen to g6, queen to d5, queen back, and then the exchange, getting into the rook and pawn endgame, and black gets control of the second rank. I can grab a pawn here, but he can also win these pawns, and I immediately have to move my rook out of the way because I'm getting mated in the corner. So black has the advantage here, although the game would continue. And there's opportunities to mess up there. Anyway, after rook f2, this is completely winning. And the simplest win is for him to just take the rook. And I can't take with the queen because it's still pinned. I have to take with the king. And now the queen can come in with check, and if I block with the queen, then he has the rook coming down just like in the game. And of course, if I don't block with the queen, then my king is forced to the back rank and it gets mated. So that would be a quick finish to the game. Let's see, he gave me one more chance. He played queen b3 first, but I still was not seeing this idea. I traded off the rook and now block with my queen, and now he comes in with rook c2. So we get the same position that he could have had earlier, and I resigned. Yeah, I just was missing that idea completely. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.